Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, Staff Training and Research Institute of Distance Education, STRIDE, Master's Degree Programs, Master of Arts, Distance Education, MADE, Second Year. MDE 416 Curriculum Development for Distance Education. Block-5 Curriculum Development Experiences. Unit 1, Tertiary Education.
Editor's note: education has a new connotation in the modern world. It is now more than the attainment of certificates, degrees, etc. Modern society needs development in all fields of life, along with the provision of jobs, which for one and all has led to the emergence of tertiary education. Jobs and education can only come together through the mode of distance education, a new beginning in our educational activities, which is not only a promise in theory but also one to be performed in right earnest. The present article elaborates this aspect clearly. The author IGNOU has introduced us to the existing educational scene in Abuja and the way in which distance education began to operate. The author discusses what the learner ought to learn. Curriculum includes all those experiences which are under the jurisdiction of the educational institution. It is the organized pattern of institution's program which explains subject matter, method and sequence of instructions. Curriculum should be designed so as to create and increase interest among the learners. The distance education mode of teaching is the right way to teach learners who are employed and are unable to continue their studies in the conventional university system for one reason or another. The author explains the nature of distance education and deals effectively with the cost factor. It reduces cost effectiveness, and cost benefit are important features of distance education. Center for Distance Learning and Continuing Education was established along with conventional university in Abuja on the recommendations of IGNOU Committee. The author has justified the establishment of the Center for Distance Learning and Continuing Education because it is necessary for developing and developed nations to provide avenues for increasing knowledge and qualifications to all learners who are interested. The Center for Distance Education at the University of Abuja is a mixed-mode institution, as education is imported through both conventional and distance education systems. Secondly, the author discusses the problems faced by the planners of the system. Distance education has adopted the instructional methods of face-to-face teaching and the use of the print media, i.e. printed lectures. But due to the negligence of center supervisors, the contact or counseling sessions have not always been held regularly. Printed lectures account for about 95% of the course delivery system. After 1 year of the program's operation, the ELD were faced with a number of problems. Most of the tertiary institutions in Nigeria were undergoing a crisis which led to the closing down of most of them and also affected the Center for Distance Education. Finance was the second major problem, which was accentuated by the problem of hyperinflation. This proved a major obstacle to the successful implementation of the program. The internal politics of the Nigerian university also affected the smooth running of the Center for Distance Learning and Continuing Education of the University of Abuja. The use of computers and audio-visual instructional aids, which is an important part of the distance education system, failed to benefit the learners. It was of little use in the center because of meager financial resources. A package deal was offered to the students, who were asked to bear the cost. The harsh economic crisis prevailing in the country prevented the students from taking advantage of the facilities which the center tried to offer. The introduction of the distance education mode of learning on a trial basis is a good attempt, although the system resembles the conventional one, and the admission requirements are similar to those of conventional students. The planning of the curriculum is well done, and the courses offered at degree level include English language, economics, history, political science, public administration, accounting, geography and law. The system has used print media and audio-visual aids, and whole system was cost-effective. The courses offered are for the benefit of a large number of learners. Due importance is given to the counseling sessions and assignments. The Curriculum includes the use of the available modern aids for distance learning. The courses offered are job-oriented and the students are evaluated through assignments, exercises, tests, projects and examinations. Many difficulties were faced in the system of tutor-marked assignments and therefore TMAs were cancelled and a system of direct testing was introduced. The results of the NAL examination are subject to external moderation, which makes it more learners-centered and learner-oriented. The curriculum designed by the Center for Distance Learning and Continuing Education at the University of Abuja is a good curriculum model and can be adopted by other institutions with some adjustments and modifications. Course development process, design, and production of teaching material. At the FERN UNIVERSITAET and the Open Universiteit, a comparison between two European universities. Introduction. Background. From 1990 to 1993, in the context of European Program Tempus, Trans-European Mobility Scheme for University Studies, Switzerland, participated in the Fernstudienzentrum Budapest project, abbreviated as FSC Budapest, whose objective was to create a distance teaching center for higher education in Budapest. The Fernstudienzentrum Budapest was inaugurated in 1991, and by 1995, it had more than 150 students. They can follow courses in the following subjects: economics, electronics, mathematics, computer science, environmental protection, social sciences, pedagogy, agronomy, and modern languages. Courses are taught in German by the Fern Universität of Hagen, Germany, henceforth FU, and in English by the Open Universiteit of Heerlen, Netherlands, henceforth O. In the long term, the FSC Budapest can play a pilot role and through multilateral collaboration participate in the renewal and development of distance university studies in Hungary and other Eastern and Central European countries. Commission des Europäischen Gemeinschaften, KEG, 1990. Indeed, in the context of current political and socio-economic upheaval, Hungary attributes an important role to teaching and, in particular, to distance training. The project relies on a partnership structure involving Hungarian and other European higher education institutions. EU and EFTA, L. Two Swiss university centers were given different mandates. The RST, initially attached to Zurich University, then to Basel, is mainly concerned with the intercultural problems that necessarily arise in a trans-European collaboration. It has also become involved in the training program for tutors, Alaman Gionda. 1992. The second work group, composed of members of TECFA, Unit 4, Learning and Training Technologies, of the Faculty of Psychology and Education Sciences of Geneva University, has been making a comparative study of the methodologies of development of training material furnished to FSC Budapest by FU&O since 1991. Pariah. The quality and efficiency of distance training material should thus always be analyzed in two ways: RST, in the educational and institutional contexts broadly speaking, and, second, for their intrinsic pedagogical characteristics. The scope of this study is far broader than the context of the FSC Budapest project and the Tempus program. Our work presents numerous aspects that are closely related to the general question of distance training and to the development of learning material. That is, design, production, and evaluation. First, the comparison brings to light two distinct types of distance universities that clearly illustrate the difference between distance university teaching and open and exible teaching. Commission des Communautés Européennes, c. 1991a. 1991b. Van den Brand, 1993. At a time when distance university teaching is being presented as the alternative to existing forms of education, we feel it is useful to clarify these two models using case analysis. Also, the French-speaking tradition often seems to consider the English Open University and Quebec's Tele-Université as their reference institutions. This situation is partly the result of the work of Franz Henri and Anthony K. 1985. In reality, the German and Dutch experiments are just as interesting. BU for linguistic reasons, they are hardly known. Our study offers the RST French language monograph dedicated to them. Finally, there is practically no literature in French on the current Hungarian distance teaching system. The interested reader should consult the original report. Pariah, 1983. Nevertheless, people involved in designing and producing course material at FUNO do not refer explicitly to these models. This study makes it clear that they present themselves more as practitioners than as theoreticians. They consider their approach to be a pragmatic and original answer to their daily work more than a critical and theoretical reaction on it. For these reasons, the study was based on interviews with leaders of the managing teams, Dr. J. Worster in Hagen and Dr. F. Gastkemper in Herlin, and on the analysis of a considerable mass of written documentation referred to in the bibliography of this study. Institutional structure of the Fern Universitat and the Open Universität. The two partner universities of FSC Budapest are typical examples of distance teaching in Western Europe. Let SRST emphasize their similarities. They were both born of the will to reform the face-to-face university system by democratizing studies, increasing access to higher education for people already active in professional life, and reducing the number of university programs with resident requirements. Their recruitment base is very similar. The typical student, aged 25 to 38, combines a professional life and studies. Available study time is, therefore, less than that in a traditional university framework. Both institutions offer, in addition to instructional materials, a structure for face-to-face work, study centers for counseling, tutoring, and examinations. The study centers thus have the function of supervision and individualization that are so important for supporting and motivating students. As to the differences, they lead us to consider each of these two universities as typical of one model of distance university training. On the one hand, the FU is a distance university, providing classic university training but at a distance, and, on the other hand, the O is an open university, offering an alternative model to traditional university training. Let us review the differences. L. Open university versus closed university. The FU tends to resemble classic German and European university training, with the consequence of limiting access to studies to only those students with a secondary school diploma. FU 1991A, 1992. 3. Contrary to that model, the OU is, as its name indicates, a university open to any interested person over 18, independent of his or her qualifications. If both universities are second-way universities, only the Dutch one is really a second-chance university teaching and research university versus teaching university. The identication of the FU with the classic university model has as a consequence the involvement of titular professors in fundamental research, as much as, if not more than, in teaching. The FU is both a research and a teaching institution. The OU is primarily dedicated to teaching and broadcasting knowledge. Research is thus an accessory activity for its teachers. The specificities of these general viewpoints have repercussions not only on the organizational forms of these institutions but especially on the methodology and approaches to designing teaching materials. Designing and producing teaching material. A first overview. We have analyzed the specific characteristics of the teaching material produced and used by both universities in a threefold procedure, a comparative inventory related to the principles of structuring the teaching materials, a presentation of design, theory, and methods, and, NALI, a description of the existing design and production practices. Since their creation, both universities have followed the path of innovation. Integrated media, written, audiovisual, electronic, and interactive, appears in all their programs under the name of Medienverband or Mediamix, FU and OU. Respectively, both universities conform to what appears to be a general rule. In this domain, written material constitutes the basic medium, and it represents about 80 to 90% of the teaching material, whereas audiovisual, electronic, and interactive media amount to between 5 and 10%. Sauve, 1994, however, both Universities are considering increasing the proportion of interactive teaching in the years to come. The written material of the FU is structured into teaching units that are sent to students twice a month. The units are in form of small booklets, which makes them easier to update. The O, on the other hand, makes the entire course material available to students at registration. This material is in the form of bound books. The result is greater accessibility for the students but less accessibility for Modi cation. Or updating. A course is considered a niched product and is not revised for years. The design of courses at the FU relies on the homogeneity of a curriculum. The Dutch Distance University opted for a modular system. The O courses must be able to be integrated into different study programs. The accessibility and the savings created by using the larger scale are that much greater. Although a different logic governs their course design, both universities have opted for a comparable system of segmentation of teaching adapted to the students' work and lifestyles, bi-monthly mailing for the FU and 4-hour course units at the OU.4. This brief description of the teaching materials produced by the FU and the OU allows us to anticipate the important differences that an in-depth comparative analysis of didactic methods will bring to light. The following pages are dedicated to this analysis. Because concepts such as course design of material and production of material do not have universal definitions. And because there are many translation problems from Dutch and German into French, and from French into English. When necessary, we provide the definitions adopted in this study. Designing the teaching material, pedagogical and methodological approaches. The design process at the FU, main issues. From the foundation of the FU, its fundamental research institute, the Zentrals Institute für Fernstudienforschung, ZIF, made it a point to formulate a didactic concept capable of guiding the development of distance teaching material. Melton, 1977. Peters, 1975. For Peters, it is not the content, the subject matter, but rather the learning process and the objectives that must be placed at the center of re-action and of the process of design and production. From this perspective, he recommended that learning objectives be attained as much as possible through technical media. 1975, pp. 3-9. He de Nes Designing Teaching Material as a Global Process, as described, for instance, by Wagner, 1991, quoted by Oliver, 1994. It includes the analysis of jobs, tasks, objectives, content, and audience, and the design of curricula, units and lessons, media and materials. Point 5. The FU's Production Center, the Zentrum ir Fernstudienentwicklung, ZFE, still conceptualizes the distance teaching situation on the basis of these general principles. The design of teaching material at the FU is based on an analysis of the system in its three interacting components: the learner, the subject matter, and the media. Fig. 1.1. In traditional face-to-face teaching, it is ideally up to the teachers to handle these three aspects. In principle, they master the content, the learners, and the human and technical media, themselves, their voices, and their presence, and the blackboard, print materials, slides, overhead transparencies, videograms, all at once. Point 6. Of course, this ideal model does not always correspond to the reality of the classroom. Too often, teachers emphasize the content to the detriment of the other two components, with well-known results. Fig. 1.1. Fern Universitat, the interacting components of a distance education system, after Dr. Wurster. The reality of distance teaching transforms this situation in a decisive way. The teacher and the learner are separated by physical and temporal distances so that the need to transform the contents for distance transmission gives the media, written, audiovisual, or electronic, a degree of autonomy unthinkable for a teacher in the face-to-face situation. To say that this teaching material enjoys important autonomy emphasizes the fact that it constitutes a whole, an entity, and that its value resides in its self-sufficiency and degree of completeness. This situation dismantles the interactions schematized above, learners and media. become components that are external to the teacher, whose role is reduced to the elaboration of the subject matter. Paradoxically, whereas the constraints of distance teaching maintain the teacher's role of external subject, expert, the teacher must take into greater account than in the face-to-face situation the two externalized components, i.e., the learners and the media. So the FU brings in new actors, the expert in teaching media, the expert in pedagogy, and the needs analyst, who have the task of helping the teacher to manage the dissociation between the three components mentioned earlier. The teacher remains in the center of the system but becomes the pivot at the intersection of the requirements of the learners, the media, and the subject matter. The existence within the ZFE of a section called Didactics of Subjects seems to be a necessary consequence of this model. The experts in pedagogy are at the disposal of the teachers and cover all the different subjects. The interactionist model of the components of the system developed by the FU cannot satisfy all the requirements of distance teaching without relying on a methodology of media. If the written page constitutes the principal medium of teaching activities, the university nevertheless aims to develop what it calls learning through integration of the media. Lehman im Medienverband. Fig. 2 shows how the FU DENES the role and use of the media in the process of teaching, learning in a taxonomic perspective. To this end, it DENES 2 reference axes, graphically represented by the two diagonals of the lozenge. The RST refers to the process of distribution, reception of knowledge, the second, to the forms of instructional intervention determining any learning process. Activity, communication. The advantage of this model lies in its ability to relate the use of the medium to learner motivation in a self-instruction situation. From the perspective of distribution, reception, the teaching material used printed matter, audio, or video cassettes, is unidirectional. Although it has certainly proven its efficiency for transmitting knowledge, this type of material is dissentient as a medium for communication and activities. Indeed, the activities offered to the learner, readings, exercises, or homework, are, from this point of view, rare and strictly limited to asynchronous forms of communication, with low rates of interactivity. Motivation comes only weakly from the learning medium. It is essentially incumbent on the learner to be self-motivating. By contrast, media such as interactive software or telecommunications offer communication links and sparks for activities that could remedy the unidirectionality of the distribution, reception process. Teaching recovers an element of learning based on active, communicative behavior. This model is the goal. For FU, it represents an ideal objective for the evolution of its current pedagogy and practices, although the actual proportion of interactive and communicative teaching material currently remains minimal in comparison to material that simply presents content. The design process at the OU, main issues. An overview. Like the FU, the O claims to follow an original didactic concept. It follows the principle that without its own didactic concept, a distance university cannot succeed in attracting and keeping students. Open Universität, 1990, page .26. So, it has from the outset undertaken the formulation of a method of design for its teaching materials that is in keeping with the requirements proceeding from its mission. The O has attempted to apply its general concept of training at every level of its institutional structure and to its organization chart, including the level of the units that produce teaching material. The O has also developed its didactic concept from a pragmatic perspective. It is not presented as a niched or definitive pedagogical model, nor has it an ambition to become one. Rather, it is a frame of reference, a set of eselectic ideas, IBID, that integrates objectives, didactic principles, theoretical knowledge, know-how, expertise, and a way of handling interactions between the partners. That is to say, it is more a guide to action based on experiential knowledge than a constituted theory. The OU has chosen to emphasize training and knowledge dissemination rather than fundamental research and production of knowledge. This deliberate choice expresses itself as true attention to the target audience. The objectives that arise from this focus relate to scientific subject matter, technical know-how, and the capacity for self-training. Let us quote for reference. L. Knowing and understanding the elements of a subject. L. The concepts, terminology, definitions, methods, theories, and models. L. Learning to use the methods and techniques that are specific to the subject. L. Mastering the process of acquisition and presentation of scientific knowledge. L. Acquiring a critical mind. And L. Learning to research and use specialized literature as well as all other documentary sources. These general objectives, which proceed from the priority given to teaching, determine the basic structure of a course, or basic course model. They constitute a general model, a sort of meta-model, because they are linked neither to a subject nor to specific content. They are, in reality, a set of specifications to which written courses must conform and which make it possible to give them a common didactic design. This design is the basis for formulating, at a second stage, the didactic plan of the course, which will, in turn, take into account the subject matter and course content. Fig. 1.3. Gradually, however, the requirements of pedagogical practice and of the subjects have led to variations of the basic course model, one of the most frequently used of which is the study unit model. The latter model is designed especially to adapt to the learner's situation. Indeed, it must be possible to study the course in the context of family and professional life. To achieve this purpose, the course is subdivided into a series of short study units, about 4 hours, each including study guidelines, intermediary summaries, and revision exercises. The general structure of a course, therefore, is as follows. Each course begins with a general introduction. Each unit begins with a brief preamble linking it to the preceding unit, proceeds to an exposition of the content, and ends with revision and self-evaluation tests. The body of the unit, the content, is supplemented by study guidelines, which are printed in the margin of the text. Fig. 6. On the whole, a course based on the study unit model combines the following characteristics. L. The material is specially designed for each course. 8. L. The text contains learning aids, such as the intentions and goals of the programs, explanations about the objectives, homework, exercises, and self-evaluation tests with answers. L. The text and the study aids are integrated. L. The course is highly structured into a number of study units. L. The basic, i.e., printed, material is made available to the students in full, and L. Electronic media are entirely integrated into the course design. In comparison to this study unit model, the textbook, workbook model, which is the second most common model, separates the presentation of the content and the didactic tools. The textbook contains the whole body of knowledge, notions, concepts, and so on, required. It is structured so that it is understandable and usable by the student in self-study. However, it is the workbook that contains the study guidelines. It presents the objectives of the course, the introduction and conclusions, self-testing exercises, case studies, comments about certain passages in the textbook, deeper analyses, an index, and, NALI, a general recapitulation. The workbook regroups the work directives and the study aids. It attempts to motivate as much as to structure the student's work, more than the study unit model. This second model makes it possible to introduce the student to separately written texts presented in an academic style of writing, which are not as highly structured as the textbook. Hence, the construction of the courses at the O is determined by two forms of logical reasoning. On the one hand, there is modular logic, which implies that courses may as a rule be freely combined in a curriculum, and, on the other hand, a learning logic, which proceeds by segmentation of the subject matter into 4-hour units. This approach presumes that the student will be self-motivated and follow the pre-programmed rhythm of learning rigorously inscribed in the course structure. At the FU, on the other hand, the regulation of the student's rhythm of learning is organized by the institution, which fragments the course and makes bi-monthly mailings. The strong integration of the different components of the institution, faculties, departments, institutes, services, expresses the overall concept of the Dutch Open University, but it may also result from the demands of designing and producing instructional material. As well, this integration constitutes the condition of success of such a development. One would thus observe, at all levels in the institution, the will to translate the basic pedagogical concepts structurally in order to create the concrete conditions for its accomplishment. From this perspective, the interaction and integration of the components are essential. We will analyze, in turn, the integration of the different agents participating in the development of teaching material, the integration of the subject matter, and, nally, the integrative design of the media, the integration of the actors. The need to integrate all the professional skills required for the development of teaching material was underlined from the very beginning of the O. The methodology set up therefore integrates these three agents: the teacher or the scientist, who is the subject expert; the instructional design specialist, designated at the O by the term educational technologist; the tutor in charge of supervising the students, who works in the study centers, Fig. 1.5. Of them, only the RST2 participate actively in the process of designing material. The tutor is considered one agent in the learning environment and plays a decisive role at this stage. The demands of this role are considered in the instructional design, the direct collaboration between the teachers and the instructional specialists, the interaction between the constraints and the requirements of the three roles combine to guarantee the quality of the product, the scientific quality, and the academic level RST of all, which depend on the subject expert, and the instructional quality next, which depends on the educational technologist. This arrangement created a Ning institutional framework that organizes and structures the collaboration between author teachers and educational technologists. This collaboration could not have been left to the haphazard effects of individual goodwill or privileged interpersonal relationships. All instructional material is produced by a team, including teachers and experts in pedagogy under the leadership of a project head, who is also an expert in the subject. The O is working on a project designed to complete this plan for horizontal integration of Speci-C skills. This project aims at building an expert system based on the teachers and subject experts' knowledge that will allow the instructional specialists to create teaching material using strict criteria for design and production control. The teacher would no longer have the function of author. Instead, as an expert, he or she would provide knowledge and expertise to develop the system that the educational technologists would use. The production of teaching material would rely on the interaction of various closely overlapping kinds of expertise. Point 9. The integration of contents, the modular system. The courses normally constitute the basis of any study program. Ideally, each of them may be integrated into several programs belonging to different disciplinary ELDs or levels of study. A course may constitute either an autonomous unit in the context of further education or an element in a study curriculum leading to a higher education degree. This sort of modular approach meets the requirements of exibility, and because it has this approach to courses, the O attains a high degree of integration in its programs and teaching ELDs. It offers the students many options for combining courses, thus increasing the exibility in the level of training that is available and the degree of freedom in the program. The demands of modularization, however, imply such a level of generality that it is difficult to design courses for Speci-C audiences. Conscious of this difficulty, the O is relying on the evolution of electronic media to make it possible, in the near future, increasingly to customize the content of its courses for Speci-C user groups. Open Universität 1990, page 27. The integration of the media mix. The idea of media mix proposed by the O corresponds to the idea of Medienverbund espoused by the FD. The similarity of these two expressions accurately mirrors the similarity of approaches and ways of working. For a better presentation of instructional material, both universities used printed, audiovisual, and interactive media. They allocate considerable resources to the development of non-print media. However, if one looks at the composition of the courses offered, In both universities, written material constitutes the basic teaching material for presenting 80% of the content. Audiovisual and interactive media simply have a complementary role. The significant difference between the two universities lies at the level of procedure that leads to the integration of the media into a course. At the FU, the inclusion of audiovisual or computer media always happens at a second stage. It is developed on the basis of a pre-existing print course. At the O, on the other hand, it takes place at the beginning of the design process and is an integral part of it. 4 criteria then determine the design of a course. In order of importance, they are L. The availability and accessibility of a medium in relation to the freedom of place and time for study. L. The instructional function in relation to the learning objectives and contents. The pragmatic function, notably in relation to the student's motivation, and L. The costs of development and use. Gastkemper, 1988, page 51. These criteria deny a pragmatic attitude about the use of the media, the simplest in a given context, the most efficient, and the least costly. It appears obvious that, in the context of university teaching, written material will constitute the basic medium. It is an established fact that does not, however, re-ect any pre-established hierarchy of the media. No medium appears to be considered secondary today, and each one is constantly evaluated according to its strong and weak points. Van Enkevoort, 1991, pp. 10-12. 0. The difference between complementarity and second place takes on great importance here. The evolution of teaching technologies could easily redistribute the relative roles and importance currently attributed to each of the media in the concept of media mix. This possibility of change seems particularly true for interactive media and the forms of telepresence or communication mediated by computer networks. The production and evaluation of teaching material. Production practices necessarily correspond to the design methodology. By the term production practices we mean the processes that led from the initial project of course design to the distribution of the product once it has been created. These processes bring in the scientific, pedagogical, technical, and administrative components of any distance university, the subject fields organized within the faculties, the specialized departments in charge of design and production, and finally the technical services that create the material and those in charge of its distribution. The main questions therefore concern the forms of collaboration between different agents, on the one hand, and the degree that the fundamental methodological principles are achieved, on the other. The production process at the Fern Universitat. Main features. Printed material. At the FU, the production of material is determined above all by 2 fundamental elements of which we have already spoken. On the one hand, the heritage of the German university model, characterized by the great autonomy of its teaching faculty in matters of teaching and research, and on the other hand, the prevalence of printed material, notably the study guide, in relation to which audiovisual and interactive media hold a secondary role. The printed material conforms to a standard model that strictly denies both its structure and its appearance. Course authors are given rigorous guidelines in a publication specially prepared for them. FU, 1991b. The standardization of page layout of printed material facilitates the author's work, but it also structures the work of the learners by developing in them certain reading habits. Technically, the ZFE has developed style sheets for the authors or the faculty secretariats used to input and shape the texts. The model corresponds to the Speci-C requirements of distance teaching and also to the FU's Speci-C mode of distribution. Each course is divided into units, the Kurseinheiten, and these are sent to the learners on a regular basis, usually bi-monthly. Fig. 6 shows the typical course structure. An introduction explains the objectives of the course, gives an overview of the subject matter, indicates the various stages of learning, and provides study guidelines to the student. The bibliography and the glossary constitute the classical tools for research and personal work in any university training. As for the course units, they usually take the shape of study guides, studying brief, which may refer to a textbook or basic work available in bookshops, not produced or published by the FU. Very rarely, the course units take the form of a simple study program, LITE program, which tells the student the steps to follow for studying the reference textbook. The printed courses are not only intended to inform and transmit knowledge within the limits we have indicated, they are also intended to motivate the student. They include exercises, recommended readings, and directions for additional work as well as available resources and the audiovisual and interactive media. The setup of a course is the exclusive responsibility of the professor. In principle, he or she takes on the design, the production, and the successive revisions of the printed teaching material. The professor is free to delegate these tasks to external authors, whom he or she selects according to their academic competence. In fact, about half of the 1,500 courses of the FU were produced this way, by a subcontractor. But these outside authors, like the teachers, are obliged to respect the guidelines of the Kursanleitung. This is the practice if not the philosophy of the institution. It shows a certain inconsistency with the theoretical model. At the same time, it constitutes a practical middle path because it takes into account the institutional constraints specific to the university environment in which the FU operates. The responsibility and the autonomy of the faculties, Fachbereich, remain unchanged, but they are nonetheless tempered by the rules for structures and shaping the courses. To a certain extent, these guidelines represent a consideration of the specific learning situation of distance studies. For production of printed material, the ZFE dened a general framework and monitors development. This is indeed the purpose of the template for page layout and of the writing aid tools. Furthermore, the ZFE has the potential for imposing a common instructional approach. The instructional designers could theoretically implement one. However, except for formal editorial guidelines, the ZFE chooses not to do this, preferring to persuade rather than to require. In terms of instructional techniques, it offers its services and its skills, leaving the authors the freedom to use them or not. Its intervention is thus at the level of technical assistance for the production of graphs and GURs, for example, not at the level of design. The operating principles for producing written material can be explained mainly by the prevalence in the FU of the prerogatives of the traditional German university world. It is also explained by the nature of the printed material itself. At the FU, instructional material is designed to meet the need for speedy publication and distribution and ease of updating. Published in paperback, the printed material does not acquire a definitive status. In theory, it can be revised each year, either for academic reasons, such as the evolution of knowledge, or for instructional reasons. The division of courses into separately published units seems particularly well adapted to this guideline because a partial update does not require a complete reprint of the course. The case of complementary media, audiovisual or interactive teaching material makes use of skills and production tools that are beyond those of the individual authors. For this reason, they are produced in a framework different from the one just described. As a result, the role of ZFE, complementary in the process of production of printed material, becomes dominant, and for this very reason, the methodological model for the production of teaching material is more rigorously applied as far as the role of instructional designers is concerned, because of the complementary, or even ancillary, role assigned to audiovisual and interactive material. The decision to create such accompanying material for a printed course occurs in a second phase, at the end of the process of the RST evaluation and the updating of the material. The initiative lies with the author or with the ZFE. Fig. 1.7, Fern Universität, Agents and Phases of the Course Development. Look at the screen. The decision to include additional media is the responsibility both of the professor involved and of the ZFE. It is made on the basis of a feasibility study that takes into account the following criteria. The methodological aspect. The complementary material has the function of activating and motivating. The new technologies are considered more able to sustain the isolated student's self-motivation than the traditional written Medium. L. The inherent requirements of the subject taught, written or graphic. Presentation may be poorly suited or inadequate for presenting certain content, such as processes. L. The evaluation of costs and the availability of production facilities. The university budget does not require consideration of criteria of protability. Process, such as economies of scale, number of students, and cost effectiveness. 12. The design and production are then entrusted to the ZFE. The expert in the pedagogy of the subject is responsible for the design, in consultation with the professor in charge. Once the production is niched, there is a last administrative step, so that the course may be distributed. The professor will examine the course in its niched form and authorize it. It is an official way of taking delivery of an order after checking the quality. This process is summed up in the Fig. 7. The evaluation of the teaching material. The evaluation of the teaching material is part of the task of the ZFE. It takes place at the end of the RST year a new course is used. After having used a quantitative and statistical method of evaluation for several years, the ZFE has now opted for a more qualitative approach, implemented by an opinion questionnaire called Criticism of the Training Material, Letext Critic, distributed to a group limited to 8 students. The responses are then synthesized by a specialized service of the ZFE and commented on by the instructional experts of the same service. Finally, the evaluation report, which has no sanctions or constraints, is transmitted to the author who may, in preparing a revised version, take into account the remarks and suggestions. After each revision, the course undergoes the same procedure. The production process at the Open Universität. Main features. We have seen the extent to which the requirements and methodological criteria for the design of material constituted an informal conceptual framework, characterized by a pragmatic approach. It is a different matter with the production process, which is dened by a very strict procedure governing all the partners. Faculties, experts in didactics, logistics, and administration, IGNOU, among other things, their respective roles and modes of collaboration. The development of a course generally follows 3 successive stages, each of which leads to decision-making and to rigorous evaluations before proceeding to the following stage. These 3 stages are L. The proposal of a synopsis, L. The elaboration of a detailed plan, and L. The publication of the course. The synopsis. The proposal to create a new course may originate from the faculties, the administration, or the teachers. Most often, however, the initiative comes from program committees within each faculty who recruit several members of the teaching staff. The proposal takes the shape of a synopsis of 4 to 8 pages. It is a comprehensive course description, which contains the title and the definition of the target group, the didactic model adopted, the media chosen, and a production schedule. This RST document also proposes authors assigned to write the course. This plan must comply with the various ad hoc criteria previously mentioned. But, since 1991, the O has introduced other requirements. L. Implementation factors concerning distribution, practical classes, tutoring, and exams, and L. Expected lifespan and availability of media technologies, Van Inkevoort, 1991. After being submitted to the Center of Educational Production, COP, this plan must be approved by the Rectorate of the O, and it is only after this procedure that a more detailed course plan may be developed. The course plan. The course plan elaborates the course project and provides details, for example of the general structure, the table of contents, and the teaching objectives. It leads to the creation of the team responsible for the production, the course team. This is where the collaboration between the different partners involves authors, experts in didactics, media specialists, collaborators from the production logistics service is organized. The course team also brings in 1 more experts on the subject in question. They are in charge of the academic quality of the project. They are not, strictly speaking, part of the team of author. The group thus constituted is responsible to a project leader, who is a member of the O and who is also outside of the group of authors. the course team takes on the following duties. L. The design and elaboration of the subject matter is the role of the authors. Recruited from among the teachers of the O or externally, the O frequently has recourse, like the FU, to authors outside the institution. L. Selection of media appropriate to the content, in the framework of mediamics, is the role of the team from the Center of Educational Production, COP. And also indirectly, through consultation, of other departments of the O, the Center for Innovation and Educational Technologies, OTIC, the Department of Research and Evaluation, O, and the Department of Administration of Applications and Examinations, AUE. L. The evaluation of the quality of the developing course is the role of the outside expert and of the COP Team 13. L. The definition of the learning environment, which also in part addresses the role of tutoring, is a role in which the COP participates, and L. Management of the project in terms of overseeing the collaboration between the different partners and monitoring deadlines and costs is the role of the project leader. The course team may be subdivided into several subgroups, each of which is in charge of one of the media used. These subgroups will then work in parallel. L. A member of the faculty concerned. L. An expert in didactics from the Center for Educational Production, COP, and L. A member of the Production Logistics section, which assembles the technical services for the production of the different mediated components of the course. The production of the courses. After these two preparatory stages, the phase of concrete production begins, and authors and instructional experts meet at collective work sessions. All through this third phase, the project leader and the outside expert make evaluations. When the course, in its written and non-written media components, reaches a level judged satisfactory, a RST version is submitted for testing to a group of students hired and paid for this task. The results of this evaluation may give rise to corrections and revisions, which constitute the last stage of the process before the faculty concerned of CIALI accepts the course and forwards it to the reproduction services. The procedure, which leads from the proposal of a course to its final production, thus brings in many agents in a framework of collaboration, whose single objective is to guarantee a high level of quality. This requirement, inherent in the obligations of any academic institution, applies equally to the written material, 200-page works on average, and to the complementary material. Let us take as an example a course in the history of art accompanied by a video disc containing 30,000 reproductions of artworks or any other production or teaching material on interactive optic disc available at the OU. This requirement for quality explains the relatively long production times, on average close to 2.5 years, in comparison with a maximum lifespan of a course, limited to 2 years. The O is aware that this situation causes significant extra costs. This fact was mentioned by the committee of experts who made an evaluation of the institution as a whole in 1990, OU, 1990, page 43. The O, however, expects a decrease in costs as a result of the constant progress in the ELD of electronic media, cf. Fig. 8, which sums up the process of design and production of teaching material. The evaluation of courses. The importance given by the OU to quality control of its teaching material appears clearly through the preceding analysis. During the course preparation phase, the quality of subject matter is evaluated by professors belonging to the O and by external experts. The didactic quality is controlled by specialists in didactics and media of its Department of Educational Techniques. Before its null publication, an experimental version of the material is submitted to a group of students. Quality control of courses at the O does not, however, stop at procedures that precede distribution to students. At its founding, the O wanted to set up a comprehensive evaluation program implemented at 3 points: during the design phase, during the launching of the course on the market, and, finally, after a year period of use. We have just seen how the RST phase of evaluation is organized. The second evaluation stage was never attained because it was too costly. As to the third phase, it is of particular interest to us in this context. The statutes of the OU prescribe that every course must be re-evaluated after VE years. This evaluation should make it possible to decide whether it is necessary to begin an update. And, if so, on what terms, updating and adapting the subject matter according to developments in academic knowledge or of the instructional processes in that ELD. This task falls in principle on the Department of Research and Evaluation. Which conducts an inquiry via questionnaire to the students. It completes the database with more qualitative information collected at the study centers, because of their proximity to the learners. At the end of this double inquiry, a detailed evaluation report synthesizes the results of the evaluation procedure and furnishes the criteria for updating the course. The updating is then undertaken according to the same process as the design of a new course. That is to say, by teamwork, grouping teachers, authors and experts in didactics. However, in practice the evaluation does not happen this way. The K does not have enough personnel to ensure the re-evaluation of all courses as they reach the VE year deadline. So the re-evaluation only covers a restricted numbers of courses, in general, VE per year. Only the most used courses or those in which problems have been pointed out by students, teachers, or tutors are thus the object of a re-evaluation. Most of the courses must therefore be updated without a really systematic re-evaluation. To LL this gap, the faculties generally make an informal evaluation of their own by establishing an evaluation law that will be taken into account in the updating process. It follows that the quality control of the teaching material of the OU is most effective during the design stage. This situation underlines once again the preponderant role played in the development process by the instructional specialist, who does indeed seem to constitute the central pivot of quality control of teaching material at the OU. Synthesis and conclusion. The design methodologies and the production processes for teaching material differ considerably from one institution to another. There is no doubt that the FU formulated the most coherent theoretical model for its methodology. It is based on the interaction of the three components of distance teaching, the subject matter, the media, and the learner. During the design of the teaching material, their respective roles are shared by four agents. L. The teacher, author, central pivot of the subject matter development process. L. The expert in media didactics. L. The expert in didactics of the subject as media specialist, and L. The needs analyst, who takes the learner into account. This diagram, for which we refer the reader to Figs Land 2, is completed by media methodology, which takes into account the axes of distribution, reception, and communication activity in the process of self-study that is speci to distance teaching. These axes refer to taxonomy of the media based on the distinction between written, sound, visual, and interactive material. The OU has chosen, for its part, a more pragmatic methodology and approach. Therefore, it is less formalized. It also takes into account taxonomy of the media comparable to that of the FU, but its methodology is inspired less by an integrationist model than by a series of extrinsic criteria, which it divides up into three groups: market criteria, such as cost-effectiveness and economies of scale; implementation factors, such as distribution, ease of examination, provision for practical work, and tutoring; and L. accessibility, applicability of technological context, and, nally, the life expectancy of the technologies. At the OU, the process leading from design to null production of a course follows a strictly structured approach. Methods of collaboration between teachers, authors, professors and academic team members, and education technologists, experts in didactics of the media and of the subjects, of the didactics department, COP, are strictly regulated. The aim is to ensure the best integration of the functions involved in the development of teaching material. Each course produced by the OU is thus the result of teamwork. The requirements of academic quality and instructional effectiveness are considered at every moment of the process, leading to the null product. The production of complementary audiovisual and interactive material is entirely integrated with the production of the printed documents, which is the basis for the originality and speci contribution of this Methodology. However, there is a surprising disparity between the pragmatism of the methodology and the formalism of the production process, which is not explained here. The production of teaching material at the FU does not follow the same pattern. In keeping with the dominant status of the titular professor in the structure of the FU, the production of the written document is entirely the responsibility of the author, who only complies with a code of editing rules recommended by the instructional department, the ZFE. The production of complementary material is, on the other hand, entrusted to that department. Such material is only produced, however, after the circulation of the written material. It is the work of well-knit team members working in the framework of the ZFE, video producers, computer specialists, graphic specialists, and experts in didactics of the subject. One thus sees a reverse position from that of the OU, a strictly structured model but great pragmatism during production. No doubt because the ZFE must accommodate the operating principles of the institution, notably academic freedom. At the outset we noted that all production of distance teaching material, traditional printed material, interactive software, communication technology, and so forth, requires a strictly de-ned pedagogical outlook and methodology. This is indeed the case for both the universities studied. However, the methodologies set up do not simply follow the criteria of their respective outlook or pedagogical bias. They are shaped as much, if not more, by the institutional realities and constraints. The role of the teacher, which greatly determines the processes of production of the material, is from this point of view a characteristic example. Conceptual models and institutional models therefore seem to condition each other mutually to push the practices in a direction that the pedagogical criteria do not entirely govern. Acknowledgements. The authors gratefully acknowledge the help of the collaborators of the two universities, Hagen and Heerlen, who welcomed them. They also thank their colleagues of the Ball University, M. Marino Ostini, Science advisor at the Federal Bureau for Education and Science, OFES, and coordinator of the Swiss participation in the Project Fernstudienzentrum Budapest, and MP Dunand, TECFA, for having kept an eye on the proofreading of this paper. Notes. 1. On the one hand, there are the Technical University of Budapest, the Management Development Center of the University of Economic Sciences, the Faculty of Mathematics of the University of Eötvös Loránd, the National Institute of Vocational Education, and, on the other hand, there are the distance teaching universities of Hagen, Fern Universität, in Germany, and of Heerlen, Open Universiteit, in the Netherlands, the Study Center for Distance Teaching in Vienna, Fernstudienzentrum Wien, the Trans-European Association Saturn, Europe's Open Learning Network, and NALI, the Federal of CE of Education and Sciences, OFES, in Bern. 2. The participation of TECFA in this project is a continuation of the involvement of the University of Geneva in the Startup Project, European Program Delta, one of whose objectives was to analyze the design and production methodologies of the European multimedia producers. The RST stage of the report was published as an internal report. The second stage of TECFA's contribution to the project concerns training of trainers in pedagogical design and engineering. 3. We have, however, seen that exceptions exist. The bearers of a degree of a short study cycle type, notably engineering studies, have access to the FU through remedial courses, and certain candidates who have professional experience but no secondary school degree may attempt university entrance examinations. 4. For the most used course model, the study unit model. 5. Our research evokes many questions, among which we would like to note the effect of didactic material on learner persistence. Of special importance in this context is a study under completion by the Distance Education of CE, of the Communauté Française de Belgique. It seems that the redesigning of the written courses, taking into consideration both pedagogical aspects and aesthetic appearance, has had the effect of reducing by half the rate of student dropout. Deschanys, 1994. 6. Classical pedagogical communication in face-to-face situations also takes the Forms of mediatized, M, or non-mediatized, M, communication, the RST case refers to technological mediatization, whereas the second to the classical situation of direct face-to-face oral communication from a person, a speaker. Whatever may be his role, trainer, teacher, animator, and so forth. In fact, in practice it is rare to end educational communication situations of a pure form. Both approaches are usually combined, alternating between verbal presentation and a mediated image. On this subject see D. Pariah, 1994, 7. Several other models have also been developed, such as the workbook, source material model and the essay, thesis model. 8. It happens exceptionally that certain courses from other institutions are adopted. 9. Things were not always thus. At the founding of the OU, printed material was designated as the basic medium, and on the basis of it non-written media were to be developed progressively. See, for example, Henk de Wolf. Development of courses and quality control instruments for educational innovation, in the Open University of the Netherlands after 4 years. Facts and Developments, op.cit, page 26. Concerning this question of equality between media, it appears that we are facing an evolution towards this equality. We were able to observe diverging opinions about this during our interviews. 10. An analogous system exists at the service of distance learning of the French Community of Belgium. The service sends printed texts as the student sends back his homework. The learner's rhythm of work thus determines the rhythm and regularity of the mailing of training material. This way of operating is understandable considering the high dropout rate and the relatively low fees. 11. Let us add that the apparent production costs of a video cassette amount to approximately 1,000 German marks per minute, personnel costs, 700,000 German marks per year for a team of 7 people, as well as the initial investment of 2 million German marks for the studio is included in the budget of the ZFE. Year in and year out, the video production reaches an average volume of 10 hours a year. The production of a cassette generally spreads out over a 3-month period. Estimated GERs furnished by the ZFE. 12. The Department of Research and Evaluation only intervenes for the evaluation of courses already in use. Organization of Tertiary Distance Education at the University of Abuja, Nigeria. Introduction. This paper discusses the problems of infrastructural constraints on the development of distance education at the University of Abuja in Nigeria. Distance education is relatively new in Africa. It started after the termination of colonial rule in the 1960s. After independence, educational facilities expanded rapidly. This expansion notwithstanding, many prospective learners could not be absorbed into the conventional educational institutions. There was, therefore, a need to set up distance education institutions. Most African countries responded by setting up such institutions. These new institutions were faced with numerous problems. Some of these problems include inadequate financial resources, constraints on the application of multimedia, mode of instructional delivery, inadequate teachers to teach in contact sessions and write course materials, escalating cost of printing course materials, and lack of cooperation from sister institutions. The evaluation of distance education at the University of Abuja. The establishment of the Center for Distance Education at the University of Abuja was a result of the acceptance by federal military government of the report of IGNOU Committee, which recommended that a conventional university should be established in the new Federal Capital Territory of Abuja. It further recommended that the Center for Distance Learning should form a strong component of the university to carry out the functions of the defunct National Open University. The Center for Distance Education at the University of Abuja is a mixed-mode institution as both conventional and distance education is offered. Verduin and Clark, 1991. Unlike most other distance education institutions in Nigeria, the distance education programmed at the University of Abuja provided university education. The courses offered at the RST degree level are English language, history, economics, political science, business administration, public administration, accounting, geography and law. The university is also cooperating with the Administrative Staff College of Nigeria to run a master's degree program in public sector management by distance education. The Center for Distance Education formally came into existence on the 1st of February 1990. Study centers were established in various parts of the country. These centers were located in the following towns: Abuja, Lagos, Benin, Enugu, Owerri, Ife, Oyo, Zaria, Kano and Yosh. These study centers were located in cooperating tertiary institutions. They are the centers of academic activities for the students and their lecturers. Students and staff meet there for lectures, tutorials, seminars, tests, examinations and practicals during contact sessions. The cooperating institutions provide such facilities as classrooms, lecture theaters, libraries, laboratories, and other equipment for use by students. Students are expected to attend study centers closest to them or the ones to which they are assigned by the center. Instructional methods. Distance education earns its status and prestige through the adoption of multimedia approach to teaching and learning. Chander, 1991. Distance learning takes place only when the student actively learns through two or more strategies, which allow for at least some interaction between him and his teachers in spite of their separation in time and space. At the University of Abuja, distance education has adopted the instructional methods of face-to-face teaching and the use of printed lectures. Face-to-face meetings, otherwise called contact sessions, are held once every month in the study centers. Because of the special requirement by the Nigerian Council for Legal Education, contact sessions of law students are held every weekend. Center supervisors expected to monitor teaching during the contact session. In the few years of operation of the contact session, it was discovered that most of the center supervisors do not perform their duties. As a result of this, contact sessions were not held regularly. The printed lecture. The printed medium accounts for about 95% of the course delivery system. This is made up of self-instructional lectures which are well structured and properly sequenced to make reading orderly and systematic. The lectures ensure students' active participation, as they contain exercises which the student has to do within sections of each lecture. Solutions to these exercises are provided, so as to enable the students to assess their own learning progress. There is also a self-assessment exercise which the students have to do at the end of every lecture. They compare their answers with those supplied by the course writer to assess themselves. After studying all the lectures contained in one unit, each student answers the tutor-marked assignment questions, unit test, under examination conditions. The answer scripts are submitted for making. The development of printed material suffered an initial setback when it was realized that the university does not have expertise in some of the subject areas. The writing of such study materials had to be contracted out to lecturers at the Ahmadu Bello University, University of Yosh, Abdullahi Bakro University, Kano, and University of Horan. The experiment with other universities did not achieve a positive result. Only a few lectures were written and submitted from these universities. Lecturers from these universities had to attend to their primary responsibilities of teaching and research. The writing of course materials for the University of Abuja seemed to them of secondary importance. They would do it only if time permitted. Those who submitted their written materials did so after the expiry of the deadline. As a result of this, when the RST set of students started their programs, most of their lecture materials had not yet been produced. Written course materials undergo many processes before they are nally accepted for publication. The subject coordinator screens written materials to ensure that they meet the standard required. After this initial screening exercise, the materials are subjected to three forms of editing, namely, content, course and language editing. The initial arrangement is that editing of course materials should be done in the writing zone, since the University of Abuja do not have the expertise to do the job. Although a few of the course materials were submitted in edited form, most of them were neither screened nor edited. Just as with the writing of course materials, it was decided that where experts cannot be found in Abuja, outside editors should be employed. To this end, the services of the Nigerian Educational Resource Development Council were employed. Experts in the different areas of the program were identa-ed and assigned to edit the various courses. Little came out of this arrangement as it turned out, as the Nigerian Educational Resources Development Council did not have expertise in the various subject areas. The university explored the possibility of conference editing. This entails bringing editors together at an agreed time. Due to unforeseen problems, it was not possible to implement this idea. Problems of ELD of CES. After 1 year in operation, the ELD of CES were faced with a number of problems. First, most of the tertiary institutions in Nigeria were undergoing crises which led to the closing down of most of them. The programs of University of Abuja distance education became victims of such crises. Contact sessions were not held during the periods of closure of such institutions. Indeed, contact sessions in most of the ELD of CES ceased completely during the 1992-91 academic session. The second problem is that of escalating cost. The cost of running each study center is like that of running a whole institution. Against this background is the hyper-inflation of Nigeria. The program is underfunded due to lack of support from the National Universities Commission and the Federal Ministry of Education. A token takeoff grant of Naira 1.5 meters was received from the National University Commission in 1991. Another Naira 1 meter from Federal Ministry of Education in 1992. Up to the end of 1993, the main source of income for the program came from student fees. The following fees are charged per session of 1993-94, expressed in Naira: 1. Law 9,000. 2. Business accounting 6,000. 3. Diploma 3,500. The third major problem was related to the internal politics of Nigerian universities. There was a nationwide strike organized by the Academic Staff Union of Nigeria Universities, ASUU. The University of Abuja chapter of the union did not join the strike. The national body reacted punitively. 1. Punishment was to ban academic staff in other universities from participating in the academic programs of the University of Abuja. The result was that the study centers and other ELD of CES were suspended. The only study center in operation now is the enlarged Abuja Study Center. Students in the 10 other study centers have been asked to transfer to the enlarged Abuja Study Center. The use of computers and audiovisual instructional packages. The use of computers and audiovisual instructional packages is becoming popular in distance education in many countries, yet the distance education program at the University of Abuja cannot take full advantage of it. It cannot be fully computerized because with the meager financial resources at the disposal of the university, it is not possible to buy enough computers. Only a few computers have thus been installed. The Commonwealth of Learning came to the assistance of the university with the donation of some desktop publishers. These machines are being used for typesetting study material. Given the volume of the work, computers are not adequate. Computers that can be used for record keeping are not available. Furthermore, students cannot afford to buy personal computers. Because of the cost, a mini recording studio has been set up with the assistance of the Commonwealth of Learning. At the moment, the university has only the facilities for audiovisual recording. Because of the high cost of recording videocassette tapes, the university is concentrating on audiocassettes for recording some of our lecture materials. There are now a few courses for which audio tapes or cassettes have been prepared. These include some of the English language and use of English courses. The present policy is that students should buy their own tapes and send them for recording any lecture materials they want. The response from students has not been encouraging. No student has sent a tape for recording. The harsh economic climate in the country has prevented students from taking full advantage of the facilities of the distance learning program. Academic programs. The academic program of distance education at the University of Abuja resembles the conventional one except for minor modifications. Each distance learning course is 1 year longer than the regular one. The courses currently being offered are Degree-level courses. LBA, Hons, English and History. LBSc, Hons, in Economics, Political Science, Business Administration, Public Administration, Accounting, Sociology, and Geography. LB-Ed, Hons, in History and English. L-Lib, Diploma-level courses. L-Law, L-Banking and Finance, L-Public Administration. In the conventional section of the university, degree courses are offered in computer science, mathematics, physics, chemistry and biological sciences. It was the intention of the university to offer these courses to distance-level students. This idea has been shelved. The financial cost is beyond the capability of the university. Admission requirements. There are various types of admission requirements for distance learning institutions. The UK Open University and Athabasca University do not insist on formal quali-cations, whereas the Turbuka and the Central Radio and Television University admitted students only if they have either a formal university entrance quali-cation or have quali-ed in the national examination held. The admission requirements for distance learning students of the University of Abuja are similar to those of conventional students. Course evaluation. Students are evaluated by means of assessment through assignments, tests, exercises, project reports, and examination. A number of assignments are given at the end of the unit of each course in the booklets of lectures already prepared and supplied to the students. These are to be submitted as required through the study center supervisor, who will arrange for their marking. After marking, the scripts will eventually be returned to the students with comments by the marker. The question and results of the NAL examination are subject to external moderation. The guidelines provided by the Senate of the University of Abuja are to be followed. The RST continuous assessment evaluation ran into serious problems. Lecturers in some study centers refused to mark the tutor-marked assignment on the ground that the honorarium for marking each TMA was too low. Many students could not meet the deadline for submitting the TMA. It was also discovered that most of the TMAs were not the original work of students. Because of these reasons, the TMAs were cancelled and a system of direct testing was introduced. Infrastructural constraints. Communication. One feature of distance education is the separation of teacher and learner, which distinguishes it from face-to-face lecturing, even though it may involve short periods of face-to-face meeting for both didactic and socialization purposes. IGNOU, 1985. The realization of this objective depends on the availability of a good and effective communication system. The poor communication facilities in Nigeria adversely affect the operation of distance education program of the University of Abuja. Mail delivery is very slow. Letters take months to get to their destination. Often, by the time these letters arrived at their destinations, their content has been tampered with. Consequently, regular communication between teachers and learners is not possible. Instructional mode of delivery. The second feature of distance education is that it is media-based instruction. The term emphasizes media, freedom from classroom limitations in location and time, as well as the ability to provide needed interaction and correction. Markowitz, Jr., 1990. Printed material is the main mode of instructional delivery. Because of low returns from outside writers and editors, the burden of writing and editing of course material was shifted to the regular lecturers of the university. This resulted in production delays arising from the heavy commitment of the academics to their teaching and research. The use of technical media to unite teacher and learner as an essential feature of distance education cannot be realized at the University of Abuja. Audiovisual tape cannot be put into full use because of poor response from students because they cannot afford to buy tapes. Also, most of them reside in areas where there is no regular supply of electricity. The distance education program of the University of Abuja started with great ambition. Initially, it was designed to be one of the best tertiary distance education institutions of Africa. Unfortunately, constraints of infrastructural facilities have adversely affected the realization of this laudable objective. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with the next chapter.